Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Burer. I'm Dean of Faculty at Dallas Theological Seminary, and I have the privilege of getting to know and to introduce to our community new faculty members. I'm here with Dr. Titus Kennedy, our newest faculty member in the Bible Exposition Department. Dr. Kennedy, it's great to see you today. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here.
We are very excited that you are a faculty member because you have a specialty that none of the rest of us have. Some of us have dabbled in it, but not specifically. You are an archaeologist, so I'm super excited that you are on faculty. What I'd love to do is talk about a little bit of your background, and then we can dig into archaeology, no pun intended. So tell us a little bit about your personal background. Who is Dr. Kennedy?
Well, I grew up interested in history, elementary school. Went to a few different types of schools, actually, and that may have helped facilitate self-study that allowed me to get more into archaeology. But I really didn't know about archaeology at all until fourth grade. I had visited a couple of historic sites, started to understand that there were still things standing in existence that were from hundreds of years ago. And then a teacher gave me a book on the excavation of Troy by Heinrich Schliemann, and he was looking into the Iliad. He thought that it was talking about some real events, and he wanted to go find that location, that ancient city, and excavate it. So I read this, and that was really my introduction into archaeology, that people went out into the wilderness in some cases, and they excavated these mounds, and deep under the dirt, they revealed these cities. And they found new historical information that could add to our base of knowledge. And I just found that amazing. And I thought that would be so cool to be able to do that. Well, as time went on, got into junior high, and my dad gave me some books on archaeology of the Bible. He actually went to DTS as a graduate here, and he had some classes in biblical archaeology, or at least that addressed that. And so he had some books from seminary, some newer ones that he had bought. And I started reading those and was very, very interested in that, beyond just archaeology, because of how much I wanted to study the Bible and learn about the ancient times of the Bible. Fast forward to high school, end of my senior year, and I decided I would like to study archaeology. I thought that it was a good pursuit, an interesting pursuit, and didn't know how it would turn out, but I thought, let's try it. So went to Biola, and I started to excavate, actually, my first semester there.
Wow.
I had a project, and of course, not biblical archaeology, but at least learning how archaeology works and how to do it. Eventually did master's and other master's, doctorate, and did a lot of first volunteering and then staff work in the Middle East, and finally to direct my own projects.
Wow, that's incredible. So it started at, I guess, fourth grade, about age 10, thereabouts, and it never left you. That's pretty cool. That's neat to get your calling that early. So.
Yeah, I guess I never grew up, because I talk to a lot of people who say, oh yeah, I loved archaeology as a kid or in elementary school, and then ... nothing happened. I'm like, wait, so does that mean that I never grew up and everyone else did? Maybe.
Well, I guess that remains to be seen, but that's really cool. Now, you said you went to Biola and studied archaeology. Where'd you study after Biola?
University of Toronto is where I did my first master's in Near Eastern archaeology, and that is when I started to do digs in the Middle East. And then after that, I did a research internship, a research fellowship at Discovery Institute, which allowed me to do more in the field work and more research, and to assist some other scholars in putting together some curriculum and material. And then I went back and did a second master's and doctorate in biblical archaeology at University of South Africa.
Okay. So you have both studied archaeology but also done it. So kind of tell us, what is an academic's life like when they're actually doing research out on the field? Do you have sort of like a rhythm, a cycle? How does that work?
So we are in the field a limited amount of the year. We can't be out there digging 12 months out of the year. So there's quite a bit of planning that goes into an excavation, as well as permits. And then after the dig, you've got all this processing and publishing. But when we're actually out in the field, we're usually doing one of two or maybe three things. You could talk about general research. Maybe we're researching other sites or artifacts and museums. But if we're targeting towards a specific project, we might start with a survey, and we're going over a larger area or an entire site, and we're trying to either discover a new site or learn some more information about that site without actually digging. What kind of pottery are we getting on the surface? Indicates when this city was occupied. Then if we get to the excavation phase, we have to choose specifically where on the site we want to dig, because we just don't have the resources, manpower, or time to excavate the whole site. It would take decades. So we try to do targeted excavations and do a place where we think this will be fruitful. We're going to find good, solid information about this site from different periods of time. So we go out there and start early in the morning and work 5 to 7 days a week, depends on the dig. Last dig was 6 days a week, but I've done 7 days a week. Can get a little bit much, but
sure.
So we do that work, anywhere from 6 to 9 hours digging, and then we have some post-processing where we've got to go through all the material. Lots of recording, and it's one of those professions where you have to understand that 90 to 99% of the time you're just going to be doing your same thing. But then there is that small percentage where you make a really exciting or even important discovery, and that's what makes it worth it. And you got to look at that going in. You got to know that, and also have a good time with the people that are around and digging at the site with you.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that occasionally you will find something interesting. What's something interesting you have found? I presume something with writing or an inscription. Can you give us an idea of what you've seen?
Yeah, quite a few things, a range of things. So if we go back into some earlier times, I've found an altar from the Canaanite period. So they were doing animal sacrifices on that. We found the bones, some bones in the altar, burnt bones.
Can you describe it? How big was it? Was it large stone? What was it?
Yes, so the stones are quite massive during that period, during the Bronze Age. They're semi-cut stones, so they aren't ashlar masonry. They're not perfectly cut, but they are fashioned in some degree. They're not just field stones. And then we're talking about maybe 6-7 feet by 6-7 feet, somewhere in there.
Okay, so pretty large.
Yeah, not a perfect square, but close to it. Yeah, they're giving a general square, and then it seems like they had a type of metal grid over the top of it in some cases, but they definitely would stack these smaller stones in there, and then they'd put the sacrifices on that. So yeah, pretty large, something that if you find it should really be noticeable and distinguishable. And in this case, part of it was actually popping up off the surface because this site, unlike many sites, was one period. That is, people lived there and used it just for one period, and then it was abandoned, and for hundreds of years nothing. Then there was some farming done later, but no one ever built over it. Most of the time we do get lots of different occupational layers built on top of each other, and so if we're going for the Bronze Age, we're going to have to dig through a lot of other layers and many, many centuries of material.
Okay, that's fascinating. Now, we have talked offline a little bit about the value of archaeology for biblical studies. Some people might even wonder, okay, why is a seminary training pastors, for example, having classes on archaeology? So what does archaeology bring for our understanding of the Bible?
Yeah, I think it brings two main things. One of those we can probably subdivide, but if we're looking at understanding the biblical text better, understanding the cultural context of it. Sometimes that might mean understanding the way that these buildings were constructed or certain type of cultural ritual. Other times it might be things like, how many people were literate or what's the indication of that. And sometimes translation. In fact, one of my favorite artifacts when talking about this subject it helped us to translate a word and therefore a verse in the Bible correctly. In 1 Samuel 13:21, if you look at translations before 1917, they don't know how to translate one of the words, the word pim in Hebrew. And so they were guessing based on the context. But it never occurs anywhere else in the Bible, and it was not even translated correctly in the Septuagint, because by that time they had lost the knowledge of what this was. So we go to Gezer, and Gezer's being excavated, and they find this stone weight, and the stone weight is inscribed in the archaic Hebrew script with pim, and they weigh it, and they find that it's 2/3 of a shekel. So it was this very unique type of weight that apparently they thought it wasn't that useful, and so they stopped using it at some point earlier on, I think, in the divided monarchy period, and everybody lost the knowledge of that. So here, archaeology helps us to
That's great.
translate.
Okay, so you had mentioned there was another area, so if it can help us clarify culture and maybe some translation issues. What else does it do for us?
It corroborates, it demonstrates the historical reliability of the text. It is, of course, not going to do that for every single verse, every single chapter, but we have a constantly building mound or mountain at this point almost of evidence that clearly demonstrates that the Bible is true and reliable. It's a real world, real people, places, and events. And archaeology demonstrates that through these just hard facts of material on the ground. And that is, I think, both encouraging for believers just to see, we know that there is evidence for our faith, for the Bible, the Word of God. And also, as in the category of apologetics, for those people who are seeking, or for use against those who are attacking the Bible, we have some answers. Like Peter says, he says that we should be ready to give a defense for the hope that is in you. And that's one of the things that archaeology can contribute, is it can give those clear reasons for why is the Bible reliable.
Yeah. What classes will you be teaching here at the seminary? I know you're going to be focusing in the Bible Exposition department. So what are your plans and the courses you're going to develop?
So we've got 3 new courses that we've slotted for the future. In fact, this fall will be one. So I've got an Intro to Biblical Archaeology class. So I'm going to introduce archaeology and biblical archaeology and major finds throughout the whole Bible in that class. And then there will be a separate Old Testament archaeology course. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on the finds related to the Old Testament, and then a separate New Testament archaeology class. In addition to that, there have been some talk about maybe focusing on some geographic regions relevant to the biblical narrative. We'll see about that, but also some biblical backgrounds classes, manners and customs, things that connect directly to this archaeological material.
That's exciting. Any plans to do anything in Corinth? I'm writing a couple of commentaries on 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and I'd like to get there at some point. Do you do any work over there?
Maybe at some point in the distant future. It is one of my favorite sites, favorite places to visit. But, as far as doing excavations, I've got to prioritize, and we got limited time. So,
well, keep me on your list if you ever go there.
I will remember that.
Okay, great. Hey, well, thanks for joining us, Dr. Kennedy. It's great to spend some time with you, and we appreciate you joining us as well. And God bless you.